Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the LlamaIndex webinar series. Today's theme is on LLMs plus investment research. So we're super excited today to be joined by Didier, CEO and co-founder of OpenBB. And OpenBB is an open source investment research platform that has been recently incorporating some awesome AI-powered features. And so today's talk will go through what is OpenBB? How is it used in financial analysis? Let's go through some basic demos of AI-powered features, and then also talk about some integrations between OpenBB and LlamaIndex, and leave some room for a QA session at the end. So without further ado, passing it on to Didier.
Hey Jerry, thanks for the kind introduction. So regarding OpenBB, what we're building is the first open source investment research ecosystem, and we go from everything down to the way you interact with the data, and then on how you analyze it when you are doing investment research. So basically, we have a few products. So we have a product that is OpenBB SDK and is open source, where basically allows you access to a vast range of data. We have almost 100 different type of data providers that we have access to, and we standardize it all through OpenBB. And then we have the terminal, which sits on top of the SDK and is basically a command line interface that allows you access to all of these data in its raw form. But then you can also, use some tools in order to leverage that data in more clever ways. So things like portfolio optimization. We've got an econometrics menu. We've got even forecasting menu using like time series forecasting technologies like open source projects like Nistla. And at the core, this is kind of what we do. And now we are building like products around that open ecosystem. And this is what we really focus on. That's a brief introduction on OpenBB.
Awesome. Maybe just to quickly give some context, what was the inspiration for starting this platform?
Yeah, so this all started when I actually started doing personal investment research. So my background is engineering, and at the time I had a few savings on my account, and you learn kind of young that the only way to build like true wealth is through investment. And so coming from an engineer where you have tools like Visual Studio Code where everything is optimized for efficiency, you come into doing like investment research and it's really painful. Honestly, it sucks. Like the experience really sucked. Because I didn't know much like the theory regarding on the financial world, I spent like at the beginning 30 minutes doing research, which was kind of all right. But then the more I learned, the more time I started spending. So I went from spending an evening doing the research on like Tesla or Apple or whatever ticker I was looking at to spending a full weekend. And the type of work I was doing was very manual intensive. And there was no reason from an engineering perspective why that should be the case. So my standard procedure was having like several different dashboards open, go into each of them, look for a ticker. One of them will show me insider trading, another one the fundamentals, another one historical, another one like funds where the ticker is there. And I refreshed them, I selected the ticker of interest, I refreshed them, I took a screenshot, I put on a Word document, I wrote my thoughts down. And from an engineering perspective, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like, how come I cannot fully automate this entire process? The only edge that I'm having is on the way I analyze the data. But the type of like the data retrieval aspect of it is like 1+1. It should be basic at this point. And so that really frustrated me. And I started writing down my way of doing like investment research, which I think that everyone out there does. The difference was that, so this was during COVID, and I was meant to visit my parents in Switzerland, and my flight got canceled. So I had like a full week on my hands. And I was like, what am I going to do in this full week? And so, I looked at this notebook and I was like, this has been a growing pain for me. And at the time I was proficient in Python. So, and I thought, or it was a personal bet and still is to this day, that Python is going to be a lot correlated with the future of finance. And we start seeing it more even on the CFA programs, they start incorporating Python and even like AI. And so I started building this platform. And this platform, the main idea for me was, okay, I want to streamline my entire investment research workflow. So everything I do manually, I want to automate it and then add my insights at the bottom. So I basically wanted to go from researching one ticker to researching like 30 or 40, because I can automate the full report and then add some notes, make a decision on whether to buy shares and how much, and then move on, right? And so the first problem that I had when I started that, and that's when I understood why this hasn't been done before, is the data access. This financial world is like known by being really hard to access data. But after looking for multiple data providers, they all have a similar go-to-market motion, which is you register on their platform. They give you a free API key that allows you to like experiment, and for educational purpose, like academia, like for students, that's just enough, like 90% of the times. But then if you want more, you pay for an API key that allows you either more requests per minute, which means that you are interested in the frequency of the data refresh, or you pay to have access to a broader amount of data. So let's say that they cap the fundamentals to past 5 years, and you pay a premium fee, and they give you access to like 30 years instead. But from an engineering perspective, that's an API key at the end of the request. Like nothing changes. The code is literally the same. And so, and then I saw that multiple data providers have these literally the same go-to-market motion. And so what I realized is that the free tier of all these data providers are actually different. So if actually leverage all of these free tiers is actually a ton of data. And for my needs, I wasn't like, heavily into investing, and I was just getting started. This is just good enough for me to get this started. And then if I'm actually leveraging the type of data I'm accessing, I don't have any issue paying for it because I'm actually taking value out of that, And so for me, that just made sense. So keeping it like free to start with, but if I saw the value on the data sets, I would just pay the data provider directly and integrate it on my workflow. And so that's what I started. I started building it, and I had like a full-time job at the time. So I started spending all my spare time on it, and I got like super excited because I could literally see what I did manually coming together, on the side. And that was just so exciting to see that happen. And this was during the GME, the GameStop days. And so after 2 months, I thought that the terminal had a good enough architecture so that people could understand what I was trying to do. So it had this kind of hierarchy type of tree structure where, you have like equities, and then inside equities, you have like fundamentals, you get like insider trading, dark pool data, options. And so it was like structured in the way I was thinking about it, trying to categorize it because I was learning about the topic. And so after 2 months, I made it open source because for me, it's like, my strength is my engineering side, and I feel like I'm a creative person, but I don't have a finance background. So like I can actually benefit a lot from having like finance folks and even data scientists helping me making this tool more powerful, because even on the data science like aspects, I wanted to have like tooling on top of it that would allow me to analyze the data in a better way. So things like, technical analysis, but also things more complex like the forecasting menu that allows you to use multiple financial time series to try to predict like what's going to happen to the stock or even like to the economy. It's like super dynamic. And so, yeah, so when like from that moment on, when I'm open source it, like we went viral. And I think that's when, for me, I understood that, this is not something just that I'm interested in. There's actually a ton more people that are on the same position than me. They just didn't really know that, something like this was possible. And because it didn't exist, like there's no other open source investment research platform on GitHub, because like financial industry is known to be like really like restrictive, and people just like, start on the proprietary and they never actually think about making it open source because there's so much money involved and everyone thinks about like, capturing value. Whereas like with the terminal, like I was more creating because people could take it and build on top of it, add their own integrations, fork the project, make it their own OpenBB terminal, if you will. And so, yeah, we kept growing, and yeah, that's kind of the origins.
No, yeah, this was a great story. And just to give an overview for the rest of the audience, right now you have an entire ecosystem of products. You have like the terminal, you have like the terminal pro, you have the SDK, and you have the bot. Could you maybe just give an overview of each of these products?
Yeah. So the SDK sits at the core. So the SDK is like our open core ecosystem. So everything works around it. And basically the way, think of it like as the brain, and what it does is really good at integrating all of these different data providers. So for instance, if you are interested on Forex, crypto, and NFTs, for instance, we will make it so that you can just use OpenBB and you have access to 3 or 4 or 5 different data providers, but in a way that is seamless. So you don't need to learn about the documentation of all of these data providers. You just use OpenBB, you put the API keys onto us, and we manage that for you. And in the future, what we want to do is so that we can like negotiate the prices even on behalf of the data vendors. So effectively giving them a new go-to-market motion. Because like, imagine like Amazon today, right? You order something, like it doesn't come always from Amazon, right? Sometimes there's like third-party vendors, but they abstract that from you, and you don't really care. You just want the product in your house. So that's kind of what we're trying to do in terms of the finance, and the SDK is why the SDK is so important. Then we've got the terminal, and the terminal is our open source product, the command line interface, and that is basically a wrapper around the SDK that allows you access to data, and is mostly targeted like quants, developers, retail investors, like academia can use it a lot. And there's like this like OpenBB scripting language that you can run, so you can automate like the way you do like analysis, and then you just run it, and in a few seconds you have like a lot of like charts and tables that allow you to make an informed decision. Then we have the bot. The bot was an earlier bet from us, because one of the things that we heard a lot is like, one of the best things about Bloomberg Terminal is the chatting. And as I was starting my journey, I was spending a lot of time speaking with my friends about investing, and we did it not on a financial platform. We did it on like Telegram, Discord. So I was like, from my perspective, it's like, even if I had access to a chat on OpenBB terminal, why would we move our chat where it is today to go onto this financial platform? Why the technology is easy so that we can do the reverse? Why not taking the data from the terminal to wherever the chat is? And so that's what the bot is today. And the bot today supports like Telegram and Discord. But the idea for us is to grow into like Slack and even Microsoft Teams if they allow it. Because we believe that if you're already talking with your team in whatever environment it is, it's much easier to get the data to that environment. And so we are not constrained around forcing you like a lock-in on our platform, if that makes sense. And then that's the bot. And then the Terminal Pro for us is like our first like really commercial product for enterprise. So it's basically in a way the same. You have access to the exact same amount of data as the terminal command line interface, but it's going to be done for enterprise, as in like the interface is going to be like a graphical user interface. It's going to be like a dashboard. It's going to be super modular. It's going to like not just like developers will be able to create widgets for it, but also like analysts is going to be that easy so that they can easily create like templates, layout. It's going to have things like single sign-on, monitoring, analytics, creating reports from dashboards. Is going to be like, just based for enterprise. And that's where we expect to create like a sustainable business model so that we can reinvest on the core SDK and on the terminal command line interface for the rest of the world.
That's awesome. And maybe this is a nice segue to the next section as we talk about like AI powered features within OpenBB. Do you actually happen to have like an existing demo, both of the terminal itself as is, and then also we could transition into kind of like the Ask OpenBB feature as well?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer doing demos like in real life, so I don't have like a video, but can I share my screen?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to share the command line interface, what it looks like today, and you can see it, right? I'm assuming yes. Okay, so yeah, a quick overview, and then I explain where LlamaIndex and AskOBB comes in. So basically, the way we have all of these menus and commands. So basically, when you see this kind of indicator, this means that is a menu, and I can go in, and then there's like spawns like other menus and other commands. So for instance, let's say I go into stocks. All of these are commands, and all of these are menus. So let's say that I'm interested on the ticker Apple. So I load Apple, and then basically I check the menu, and you can see that now I can do, for instance, candle, which displays the chart of Apple. And that basically prompts a new chart, and now I can see the chart of Apple. And then things that we can do. So we created this library is based on Plotly, but we modified it a bit. And basically, what that allows us to do is to save the data onto a CSV, save the data onto a PNG. We can overlay charts, so I can export these and overlay it with Microsoft and do like technical analysis. Again, overlay things like earnings per share over time, and overlay it here is like super dynamic. But the interesting part is the amount of data that it has, right? Because now I go into technical analysis, and this is a full other menu, right? And I can do something like EMA-H, and this gives me the helper function regarding exponential moving average. And so I see that the -L is how I get access to the length, and so I can do, let's say, the length 50 and 200. And yeah, this always happens on my other chat. And here you go. You have access to that data. So you can see all this works as an hierarchy. So this is the TA, but then I can go into the fundamental analysis menu, and you have things like market cap, overview, splits, ratings, management, supplier, income, balance. I mean, you've got like, we have 900 commands, I think, which is absolutely wild. And then all of these here on the side are the data providers. And you can select which ones you want by default on our hub. So the hub is basically the place where you have access to all of our products. And so we allow the users to select which data providers they want by default, and also set their API keys on the hub so that we do all the management on their side, so that it's easier for them. But then for us, it was important that, you know, okay, this is nice, but like, I want to be able to automate. So basically we allow users to create like pipelines of commands. So let's say I can do like stocks, and then I can load Microsoft. Let's do technical analysis, and I do MACD, and then I go back one, I go into fundamental analysis menu, and then I do the income statement, for instance. And this is like, you know, runs all, and they are popping on my other monitor. Here we go. So here is the MACD indicator, and here is the income statement. And then on the tables, this is like fully customizable. So you can change the theme, you can change the font size, you can have colors, you can filter by column. So if you don't care about the last those years, you can just keep it like this, and then you can export into a PNG. So it's like very modular and powerful, and because it's open source, everyone can improve in terms of like the tooling around this data. And then basically the next step for us was being able to create a script. And so basically a script is a collection of commands like this, but in a script format. And so yeah, is really powerful. So now you may be asking, okay, what is AskOBB, right? So the main thing though is like, for me, that I've been using and developing, you know, the platform for like 2 years, I know these commands by heart. So if I need to do something, for instance, I know that if I go into stocks, and if I go into insider trading, and if I do stats, I see the insider trading stats from in this case, like Microsoft, which was the ticker that I uploaded. But a new user doesn't, right? They don't know that because they are getting started. And so our take was like, we could decrease a lot the barrier of entry if we abstracted these like query system, and if we made it really easy for them to just get access to the data that they're interested in. So that's effectively what AskOBB does. So AskOBB allows me to say things like, okay, I want AskOBB, I just care about CPI of Portugal, Italy, and Spain. Like I don't really care about what commands I need to achieve that. I just care about that command. And then you have here what it does is it suggests the commands, and then you just say yes or no. So we are using these to basically make the AskOBB better, and it basically generates the command necessary in order to trigger that.
Got it. So at a high level, it's basically like a natural language interface to convert, you know, like kind of more informal natural language into a command format that like the OpenBB terminal can process.
That is correct. That is correct. So we don't go past the data access. So we actually render the data from the API. So this is why like the data vendors like reach out to us all the time to be integrated on the platform, because we are not stealing their data. We are not even storing any data whatsoever. What we do is we just have like a middle layer where we do the routing to these data providers. So we stop at, for instance, let's say that you ask like revenue from Apple from 2013 or whatever. We stop at the moment of the query. We actually don't dive in the data because we don't have access to it. And so we retrieve the user with the data from the data provider. And that's kind of, I think, one of the big differences from other models that I've seen. So in a way, we kind of work like Google, if you will, basically, where you write like something and they create like a list of links. We do a bit more than the links because we show you the data, but we don't go inside the source to give you that. And so that keeps the data vendors like happy, because, you know, they get the request, and then they can upsell through us basically.
100%. I just think it's very interesting because, you know, you've kind of developed this rich query language within OpenBB terminal itself. That you've internalized very well because you've created the language and probably know everything by heart. And it's almost just like kind of easing the like onboarding and access to everybody else who's using this. And to that end, it kind of reminds me of some of the other features people are building with like LLMs plus like data interfaces. I think, for instance, like the text to SQL features and just like being, for instance, like there's a few other projects out there where you're converting like natural language into like SQL queries to run over your database for like structured analytics. And so to that end, this seems kind of similar to that, in that you're using LLMs as a way to kind of like improve the ease of access to certain types of data by making the interface easier to use.
That is exactly right. Yeah, that is exactly right. And for us is about, so what I showed right now, and this is what the AskOBB allows you today, is basically just returning like a query for one specific data. But because we have our own scripting language, and when you create your script, you can host it on OpenBB Hub, and you can add a description. Like our next stage is to actually do more powerful things, because we can use that scripting language data built from users in order to train an LLM, so that it does more than just return like one data set, but you can do like sequence of actions, or you can do, a full analysis on Microsoft based on a lot of data on how people are doing it today using these queries from OpenBB. And then, it's kind of like a flywheel effect. With more people, we have more data, the model becomes better. And so this is kind of why this is so exciting in a way.
100%. Maybe just to kind of give a little bit more color to the audience. One is, do you happen to have like a few more examples of, like, for instance, Ask OpenBB in action? And then the next part is that we can chat about is just like the kind of like how the stack works.
Yeah, so AskOBB, I mean, I can try any command. So I can say AskOBB, I don't know, Apple, stock, price, target. I mean, sometimes it's not like, it doesn't work perfectly, because, and I can explain why, because of the tech stack, but it works like relatively well for the first time like we released it, and that's kind of where we wanted to get started, in the point that we have like above like 60-70% success rate. Is more tricky sometimes when it depends on the state. So for instance, this command that I accessed, it goes into stocks, fundamental analysis, then price target, and there's an argument that's the ticker. But in some instances, what happens is you need to add a new command in the middle that loads the ticker. And so when that is necessary, because of that state component, is a bit harder for the model to understand that. That's kind of what we figured out. But for things like the economy menu, where the commands work ad hoc without needing an external command to save the state, the success rate is rather good. Yeah. So yeah, we can ask like everything. Can ask AskOBB. Let's try Google dark pool data. Yeah. So for instance, in this case, it's not working properly, right? So I'll give like feedback saying this is not correct. And I know that because I know the command. And so what you need to do is you go into the DPS, and here is where you have like the dark pool data that you are interested. So you have dark pool versus OTS, or you have fails to deliver, or get dark pool short position. And yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, and this is what we're working to improve. But yeah, in terms of like how it works, so this is like heavily built on top of LlamaIndex. So basically we have all of this is documented. So let's say I am into the stocks menu, and I do, okay, what does the load command does? Basically, there's a documentation around that load command. So we explain what it does, we show how to use, and then it says all the parameters, and then we have examples here. And so what we did with the LlamaIndex is that we provided all of these commands, which are like a lot, like all of these are commands, and then you can expand them, fixed income, ETFs, you can expand them, and then the submenus. And we gave all of these to LlamaIndex, which then creates like a vector index, and using, I think, OpenAI embeddings, right? And then basically when we do a prompt, we go compare against that like vector database for the similarity regarding the embedding, and then based on the closer like match, using like something like a cosine, I'm assuming, it returns that as a context to the model, which in this case by default OpenBB is paying for the GPT 3.5, but if you have an API key for the GPT 4, which we found that he actually provides better results, but is more expensive. So for us, there was a trade-off cost. You can set it, and then your model using that context and your query is able to relatively well create that command that is the correct to access the data, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so at a high level, you're using LlamaIndex and LLMs to basically index the documentation on all the commands on how to use OpenBB. And it seems like, I mean, you have a very comprehensive range of docs. If you just like scroll down, it seems like there's a lot of stuff in there. And so the idea is that you would,
crazy.
So the idea is that when a user asks a question, you would first do some sort of retrieval from your index to fetch the relevant command args, and then you would have some prompt to translate the natural language query into the command.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, the LlamaIndex is like so good. It's like two lines of code to do like so much.
No, 100%. The more I see this, the more it reminds me of like certain pipelines for structured analytics too, because I think just to, for instance, like do like text to SQL, for instance, in the event that like the table schemas are very large and very big, and you can't just fit everything into the prompt, which I imagine is also the case here. You can't just dump like the entire API docs into the prompt. You do some sort of like retrieval mechanism first from some vector store, and then you figure out a way to inject that into the prompt itself.
That is correct. Yeah, I mean, what we're doing, you could say that is almost like a classification problem in a way, because there's like an answer, but where we want to go is to make it so that it can be more than that and help you doing like research. So saying like I want to do research on this ticker, help me get started, and then the models say first go to this command, run this allows you to understand this. I mean, this is kind of more in the future, but I think is where we're heading.
Awesome. And I think there's a question from the audience, just a kind of a technical question. When you do retrieval from this index or database, like, do you happen to know like the number of nearest neighbors that you retrieve to make the results good?
Oof, that's a good question. I actually don't know. I would have to look into the code.
That's totally fine.
Yeah, the good thing is code is open source.
Great. The next piece of this is so in terms of like talking about some of the you mentioned a little bit about some of the current limitations, like, it's not able to kind of like maintain state, like sometimes it might not be able to return the right commands. What are your thoughts on the current limitations and kind of potential like improvements to the current natural language interface?
Yeah, so one thing that we had to add to all of these data here was more examples of end-to-end prompts. So for instance, right now, when you click on one of these commands, let's say yield curve, right? We explain what the yield curve is, and then we say that usage, you can select the date, and then you can select the inflation adjusted, whether it is true or not, okay? And that's it, right? But this command is ad hoc, which means that when you want to access it, you just actually, this one is within the economy menu, so you need to do is within the fixed income menu, so you just need to do fixed income /YCRV, right? So that's kind of easy because that's kind of straightforward, there's no dependency. But when you are on something that relies on a variable, that's when it becomes tricky. So let's go on an example. Let's use I like stocks because I'm comfortable with that one. Stocks, let's use the behavioral analysis, for instance, and let's go for, I don't know, headlines. Okay. No, this is analysis is in general. Let me see, sentiment. Okay, so for instance, this sentiment, what tends to happen is you select the limit and you select the past number of days on the command, but it acts upon a ticker that has been previously loaded. So basically what that means is when I'm here and I go into the behavioral analysis menu, there's this ticker that have been previously loaded that when I run sentiment, it will take it. And so if I do like load Google, for instance, it gets updated, and so that's the one that gets parsed, and that is difficult. And the reason why it's difficult is because we don't have those examples here. So on the text examples that we do, we just have like, okay, this is where we are in the tree location, and then we just run sentiment. But there's no like anything on the text telling the model that you need to load something. So what we had to do is add more examples on end-to-end. So basically say that if you want to run the sentiment command for Google, you need to say stocks dash like load Google, and then going to BA, and then going to sentiment. And that's like how we build it. And actually, I think I have actually that open because I wanted to share that.
Sure. Yeah.
So 1 second. It's not this tab. I think it's this one. No, sorry. I thought oh, it is this one here. Sorry, I thought I had this open.
No worries. Maybe a quick question here is,
here.
Oh, sorry, go
on. No, you're good. Yeah, so basically, let's say that we are onto about OpenBB. This is the guy I want. He's on OpenBB terminal, miscellaneous, and then GPT index and the data. And let's say we have, let's go to that one that I was talking about, which is into stocks, BA, which is going to be somewhere here, like sentiment. So we add these sentiments, like examples, where we say analyze sentiment for symbol using default settings. And then we tell him that, you need to add this command. So it's not just about what you saw on the documentation, but we actually add that section.
Got it. So you have some like auxiliary text that you can also retrieve.
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Great.
Yeah, that's kind of the one of the hardest things that we did. That why this is tricky. And then the other one is because the load mechanism works the same regardless of the asset class. So sometimes if you are trying to load like a Bitcoin, you will try to load it in the stocks class, and that's not really correct. So we need to to basically provide you the information that some tickers are crypto asset and others are stocks, and yeah, that's tricky.
Got it. The other piece you kind of got me thinking about, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, is that a potential future direction of this is, so right now, it's a question answering layer over kind of like one command. So you do like natural language and it'll like load the relevant command and potentially assume that stuff has like been done beforehand. One thing you could do to make this almost like a bit more auto GPT-like is to add like agent-like behavior, where you basically have like, enter a command. It can do a repeated sequence of commands to actually give you the tools that you want. And so we did launch, like, for instance, our data agent abstractions yesterday. And so if you, for instance, like provide an agent with a set of tools, like some of which might kind of be able to like access different parts of the data and like output certain commands, then you could potentially like do something where you input this top level natural language command, and then it would first like know how to load stocks, and then second do like sentiment analysis. So kind of like do a multi-step approach. But there's certain trade-offs I think in my mind. But
so one of our contributors of the community called Derek, he actually forked the AutoGPT project, and he made him access OpenBB SDK to do exactly that. So basically to have agents, because that's for him, that was the next step. And I think that's amazing what he did, which is basically giving him access to the SDK and let the agents, grab the data that he thinks is relevant. Yeah, so that's a cool idea.
100%. Maybe just chat a little bit about just like the broader scope of AI, OpenBB, and investment research. What is kind of like next in both like the short term for incorporating like AI in general and LLMs into OpenBB? And then maybe after this question, I'm kind of curious, like, what are your thoughts? Like, what's your vision of the future of like investment research, AI, like open source? Like, what does the future look like?
Yeah. So the first question was, I forgot already.
Just like in like the kind of near future, are there any like exciting plans to add more AI stuff into OpenBB?
Yeah. So the AskOBB, I think the improving that experience is going to be like very important for us in terms of like individual command retrieval, but then doing a pipeline of commands. So you being able to say, I want to compare the price targets of Apple over time versus SP500, which is something that you cannot do anywhere. But I'm talking about just being presented with a chart that does exactly that. So for instance, even if we talk about Bloomberg GPT, right? Like you read that paper, there's like two main things that they talk about, which is one of them is like, who's the CEO of like Citibank, and that's a Google query that takes 5 seconds, right? And then the other thing that they mentioned highly was you write like an article and then they create like an headline for you. That's also not really impressive, But then on the paper, if you actually read, they mention something that is actually really cool, which is pretty much what the AskOBB does, but they actually get the ownership of the data, so they can do that even more, like, dig inside the data. And is saying we're using natural language to have access to data, right? But what we want to do is one step after that, which is basically being able to say what you want to do with the data that you have access to and prompt it into a chart. So instead of saying, give me Bitcoin data, give me SP500 data, and myself having to figure out how to overlay them together, just doing it on the prompt, say overlay Bitcoin data since 2015 with the SP500, and it just prompts me that chart. And we will be able to do that. Like James, the co-founder, is actually working on a feature called Hold On, which is similar to, if you're familiar with MATLAB, you know what that means. That basically holds the figure up and allows you to chart on top, and that will basically allow us to overlay charts of data that you would not think like to do it initially, but like it's going to become really powerful. So I think that's kind of one of the main steps for us. And then the second one on the terminal is the scripting language. So leveraging that script. So basically what that means is if you go into the terminal, so this is the hub, I can go into my routines and we can go to a default, and I have something that's called like financial due diligence, right? And what it does, analyze any company in detail, which is not only relevant for complexity analysis, but also if there is a need to replicate the analysis for a different company. And then what you see here is a lot of commands that do this analysis for a company. And what is this argv is an input, which means that I can go onto the terminal and I can do something like X because I'm executing it, and I want the financial due diligence, and as an input, I'm going to do it to Apple. And so what this does is basically automating my entire investment research workflow. And so the next step for us, and I can show the output once this finishes, which takes like 30 seconds or so. But the next step for us is actually providing this script with this description and what it's doing into LLM, plus the community routine, so what everyone builds, and use it as pretty much like an agent, as you said, to help you do investment research, but also like learn on how you should do it, what things you should care about. Yeah, I think that's going to be like really powerful, and I don't think there's anyone else like in the space to the level that we are doing it, at least that I know. So yeah.
And this is relates to the second part of the question too. I mean, this kind of is pretty exciting, right? Like it gets into this like almost like agent-oriented future. You have these like automated knowledge workers that can operate over your financial data and just like really be an assistant to the user to help like act upon this like interface to the to all these like financial data providers for investment research. In your mind, like what is like, let's say a year or even like 3 years from now, what is your vision of how like OpenBB evolves as a platform, and how does AI fit into that future?
Yeah, that makes sense. By the way, this was the output of that, that script. Cool. It took like 30 seconds, but all these fields is, is everything like customizable, and is an Excel, but it could be popping on the screen. It could be being saved as a CSV file, pretty much anything interested. Yeah. To reply to your question, so the way I see it is like we come with a very engineering approach to the financial world, and this is what our strength is, And so in 3 years, what I expect is the whole investment research like ecosystem to be built on top of OpenBB. So right now, if you talk with like big firms or like even smaller firms, what tends to happen is they have like a Bloomberg, a FactSet, or Refinitiv, and then they need to still build their own complementary solutions on the side. And that's regardless of the firm you talk with, because a proprietary solution will always be proprietary. So if you want to do something even slightly different, it's not like you can call them and ask for the feature. You need to build it because you can buy it. And so we want to create this like framework and this like a full ecosystem so that people want to build on top of our platform. And so right now we've been spending a lot of time on the Pro because we need to build like a sustainable business model, and the Pro is basically going to be like if you think about it, it's actually a use case of what you can build on top of our ecosystem. It's just that we have like the resources to make it like, you know, ready to like SMEs to start using it, like, you know, straight at the moment, and like have like, you know, 5 or 6 seats. And that platform is going to be like a much better user interface, and it will have all the like collaborative features, you know, what you expect as an enterprise product pretty much. And the first stage is to have it like to be like very modular and customizable, so that you can add your own data integrations, create your own widgets to it, you know, be like dynamic in terms of how you create dashboards. So bringing that kind of automation and very big like flexibility that the engineering world is used to on our tooling. And then the next step is to integrate more AI things. So things that we are thinking of is like, for instance, providing a link and being able to use an LLM to understand like that link and summarize what's going on. The other one is like based on the data that we have, you know, being able to write something like, you know, do a research report based on, you know, this dashboard that I created. Just tell me what you think, you know. And but that's kind of the next step, and I think we're really far from that, because we need to roll out first the pro, get some more feedback on it from actual like firms, paying customers, and yeah. But yeah, I see, to reply to your answer, like in lesser words, in 3 years, I see us being like the you know, an open source investment ecosystem. Because we all also built in Python, you know, and like Python is not going to go anywhere. And so like that's kind of one of the advantage of people contributing to the project, which is like, you know, they contribute to the project in Python. So even if they don't end up using OpenBB, it's like they are developing Python. So it ends up being useful for like the hedge fund they are working in, or like the quant firm.
Awesome. And like, I guess this goes into some of the questions from the audience as well, but you know, related to this idea of starting to add AI features into an interface like OpenBB, what are your thoughts on like the bar, like the bar that users expect in terms of quality? How far are we from that? And then also, how do you think about how to measure like performance evaluation and adequately like test the performance of like these AI-enabled features?
Yeah. So you mean like in terms of the accuracy of the command, so natural like language to command? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say we're still like a few months far off, because like we released it, I think, I mean, it was earlier this month, I think, yeah, 2 weeks ago. And so we are looking at like the logs data so that we can like improve, but there's still quite a few improvements. And so what we have developed, or one person on our team, or machine learning engineer, has developed is like a framework to be able to test. Basically, because we kind of know the answer, and if we don't, we can, you know, do it manually, because based on what the user writes, you know, sometimes users write things that, you know, even as a human or an expert in the area, you don't really understand what they mean. So linking to a command, like, you know, would be impossible, because like we don't even understand what the person is trying to do. But in a lot of cases, it happens that you actually know exactly what they were looking for. It's just that the LLM didn't retrieve. So we flag those, and basically we add that as on the example as in terms of context, in terms of like, you know, what I just shared earlier, in terms of when we show like the end-to-end, we just add another quote of a new way that the user used to ask for that information. That might be slightly different than the examples, and that's why the context wasn't enough for the LLM to pick it up.
Great, that was actually the next piece of my question,
kind of,
which is like because I remember during the demo you had like a user feedback section where in the beginning you said like, hey, this is actually not the correct answer, and I was about to ask like how you're actually using that to help improve the feature.
That was added like, I think two days before the release. We just had at the beginning yes or no, and so when is no, it means that, you know, the user knows that the command is wrong, and so it flags and we check it on our end. But the feedback allows the users to give more feedback. So basically, when it's me, for instance, using it, I just say the command that I was expecting, because I know it. But other users can use it to say that, you know, oh, I've tried quite a few and it doesn't work. Can you look into these or something like that? And then we will have access to these on our logs, and we will take that into consideration for our next iteration.
And just be explicit, this feedback gets stored into like some sort of system, and then you can like basically use this as additional context that the LLM can look up from when you
that is correct. That is correct. There's also another thing at play, which is the model itself. So we found like an improvement when using GPT-4 over 3.5, but because of the cost, we are only paying for the 3.5. And so, yeah, that also has like an impact on the success rate of the,
Got it. And just for the sake of completeness, I think last question here is, yeah, I think Ethan asked, in terms of the UX, like out of curiosity, do you guys make a conscious effort to kind of build using like a terminal like experience versus like some sort of more GUI focused experience?
So like the terminal, we've been working as it is today for I think like two years and a half now. So it's been like a lot of iterations to get to where it is today. Things like even that bar on the bottom that you see here, like, that was kind of from feedback that like users didn't know that, you could use H like everywhere, Q everywhere. The autocomplete is something that we added kind of recently. The interactive charts and tables is something that we added recently. So for us, the terminal command line interface is actually really important because we see it as like being really good to get like first started with the platform, and then is good enough for us to distinguish from a pro product that is more for enterprise and that we can monetize. So we will not like never abandon the terminal, because I think that's like our roots. And like you might think that people want something like that is user interface friendly, but the feedback that we get from like our users is that they actually really enjoy the terminal style because they feel like hackers having access to this financial information. So, and I think it's part of our roots, if that makes sense. And ultimately, it's just a wrapper around our core, which allows us to develop the core further, which then is used by our other products. So yeah, terminal won't go anywhere.
Cool. And I think that's a good place to end. Thanks so much, Didier, for taking the time to chat with us. The OpenBB is an awesome platform, and the Ask OpenBB feature is it's like a great addition, and we're happy to continue supporting you guys, and as you guys like develop more advanced AI techniques, especially as you start getting into fancier stuff like agents or kind of like additional context augmentation, those things. All right.
That sounds good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.